Figure it out.
Hello, this is Adam Koralik from Figured Out Productions. The following video is a video of some kind, and I hope you enjoy it.
Hey guys, it's Adam here, and welcome to PlayLoad. This is all my video game pickups for the month of June 2024. And very uniquely this month, as you can see, there's a lot of stuff. Every single one of these things came from the United Kingdom, the UK. We're going to talk all about it. Before we do that though, if you guys could do me a favor, please like this video, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't done that before, as well as check out all my social media stuff in the description. I've got Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Discord, Patreon, Spreadshirt, my travel channel, and yeah, I just appreciate the support on those platforms. Thank you so much. Let's go ahead and get on with it. Now, yeah, so if you guys saw the previous episode of PlayLoad, you'll know I had been to the UK just before that. And then, well, long story short, I basically took 2 trips to the UK and I was home for like a week. And the reason that was is I had to go there the first time, and then while I was there, I was invited to a convention called Revival Game Not Over. However, I really had to go back and take care of real life stuff, plus I had to bring the Sega Pluto, so like I had to go back and forth. It was whatever. But that was fine. And so the second trip, once I was done, with my work, I was able to just go on to the UK. And in that time, not only did I go to the convention itself, but I also did some game hunting. I met up with some buddies. We did, trips to a few different places. There's actually a video on the channel already about British game hunting, and there was one specifically at Super Tomato in Cardiff, and then a separate video about, stores throughout the Midlands. So that was a lot of fun. So we're going to talk about all the pickups from that adventure as well as the con itself. So the first thing though is actually not from either, but it is from the UK, and it will be getting its own video. So yeah, I got a care package while I was in the UK from the UK, delivered to the UK. That might sound a little weird. Here's what I got. This is a few different discs. The first one is this little promotional purple disc that is about an event that I wasn't an attendee to. This was just like a bonus thrown in. I swear this will make more sense in a minute. The second was a Dreamcast Indie Sampler Volume Number 2. This is a Dreamcast demo disc made by Wave that includes a few different demos. Shadow Gangs, which is a game that's already been released and I did a video on. Harlequest, which is a game that's coming up, as well as a thing called Tunnels, which is just a proof of concept tech demo. This was something that Wave decided to send to me for the purposes of also sending me these. This is the Japanese and American copy of a new Sega Dreamcast game, and I say new in quotations because it's new to me, but it has actually been out for the better part of a year, called Driving Strikers, it's basically like a Rocket League type of clone for the Dreamcast. It was created by Reality Jump, they're the developer, and then Wave published them. So basically what happened in this case, and this will be getting its own video relatively soon, so keep an eye out for that. But basically what happened was they were supposed to, well, they did. They sent me a copy of this like last year, I want to say around September, because that was like the time for the birthday, and that's when that was supposed to happen. I guess it got lost in the mail at some point, coming from the UK to the US, and to be honest, I kind of forgot about it. And then there was no real communication with myself and Daniel over at Wave. And eventually, like when I was in the UK, I guess he saw, that I was there, he tweeted at me, we talked for 2 seconds, and then what came of that was the realization that the package apparently had been lost and whatever. So since I was in the UK long enough, he just went ahead and sent me this package within the UK to where I was temporarily staying. So I brought it back. That's what happened with that. But yeah, so huge shout out to him, and stay tuned. Like I said, there will be a video on that. I'll put a link in the description if you want to check that particular game out and pick it up. Now, moving on though, we have some other Dreamcast stuff. Now, we're going to kind of split this up between stuff I picked up at the convention and then stuff I did in the game hunting. I guess the game hunting pile is this last one, and all this stuff in the middle is basically the convention. So I got a badge for being at the convention. It was my special guest badge, handwritten, special edition. But I really didn't need that. My face and the fact that I was the only American walking around was kind of my my ID, as it were. But one thing that happened at that con is that a lot of people kept giving me stuff. Like, people came out to see me. They came out to see the Sega Pluto, whatever. There was a lot of people that were just giving me things, which was very nice. You don't have to do that, but thank you. I very much appreciate it. The first person who did, at least for the purposes of this video anyway, was a guy named Steven. He had emailed me in advance and said, like, are you going to be there the whole time? And I was like, yeah. He's like, all right, I got some stuff for you, some Dreamcast demo discs. So he brought them along. These are from Dream On, which was a British Dreamcast publication back in the day that included demo discs, much like our official Dreamcast magazine back in the day. And so he just gave me a few of these demo discs. This one contains demos for Skies of Arcadia, 18-wheeler American Pro Trucker. This has Soul Reaver 2 and Sega Swirl on it. This one has Virtua Tennis. And then this one has what looks like Looney Tunes Space Race and a few other things. But yeah, just demo discs that are very cool to have from the Dreamcast stuff. The North American Dreamcast demo disc library is relatively small. I've talked about this in the past. The European one isn't much better. It's the Japanese one that's crazy because it's got like demos for individual games that only came out in like one store as a pre-order item. Those are like essentially impossible to get. But all the same, very cool to get some new Dreamcast stuff. So thank you very much to Steven. Now, with the convention itself, it was run by a guy named Craig, who was the guy who invited me in the first place. And he actually created a book. This is called Game Not Over. It's basically about obscure hardware. He actually autographed it and everything. But yeah, he actually personalized this one to me. I am literally just noticing that. Hey, Adam, stay retro. Yeah, I will. I mean, look at me. But yeah, the coolest thing about this, and this is why I think that he was so excited to have me at the con, if I can find the right page. He has a whole section on these like obscure game consoles. And one of them was the Sega Pluto. It has a whole section about the Pluto. Now, what's interesting about that is that there's only 2 functional black Plutos and 1 white one. So the one he's got photos of is the other one, not the one that I have access to. And that's the one he's using most of the photos of there. There's also the white mock-up one that's down in Texas. I did a video where I brought the, I'm going to say mine. It's not mine. It's owned by Roger Vega, but he let me borrow it indefinitely, which is why you see it all the time. I brought it down to the museum in Texas, and we did like a prototype reunion with it. This photo, however, from a Ben Heck video that I worked on with Ben on, that's the motherboard of the one that we have possession of. So it was just very cool to see like this book talking about this obscure piece of hardware, and to actually, you know, I've got it, I possess it, isn't the fact that I'm the custodian of it. But either way, very cool. So yeah, it was cool to kind of bring that all together. So thank you very much, Craig, not only for having me there, but also for the book. And I was talking to a guy named Paul, and he actually runs a magazine. It's called Pixel Addict. I'm going to do an interview with him at some point, but this is mostly about Amiga stuff and retro gaming, and if I can find it, in here there is a reason I'm pulling this up, if I can find the right page. There it is. I'm in this, and I had no idea. That's just a photo of me holding the Sega Pluto. This is from a convention called OLL Gaming 2023, which was actually partially created by the guys at Wave. Daniel specifically was very influential in having me at that con, so it's kind of like very tight-knit. Like if you're in the retro gaming community in the US, there's a good chance people kind of know each other. Very similar deal over there. A lot of people very much know each other, so it was very cool to integrate with that network and those guys and meet them all. So yeah, very, very cool to have that there. But yeah, so Paul, I'm supposed to do an interview with at some point for this, but I'm waiting on your email, dude, if you're watching. Now, this wasn't that convention itself, but I just thought it kind of made sense to put it here. So on this trip, I took another trip out to Cardiff to a store called Super Tomato. But because I had been there like a few weeks earlier, the inventory hadn't changed a whole lot. So I was just like, okay, I asked Tom in advance if he had any remaining like Amiga CD32 or Amstrad GX4000 stuff. And he's like, not really, you wiped me out. Then he ended up finding something. He's like, hey, I have some of these Amiga magazines. So these Amiga magazines, I don't know much about, but basically they were a magazine for all this Amiga content, and they would come with 2 things. They would come with a demo disc. This worked on the Amiga CD32, and then it had a little floppy drive that was, you know, work on Amiga PCs, and I'm assuming it was mostly the same content in there. Yeah, I kind of thumbed through these just because I was curious. And my favorite part, if I can find it really quickly here, there was ads back in the day. Like, I'm sure if you grew up in North America, you were familiar with the whole, like, Sega does what Nintendo don't thing. But they had one in this magazine that I just thought was pretty hilarious, if I can find it here. Although, to be fair, I don't know which issue it was in. Oh, here it is. So look at this. This is about the Amiga CD32. After Sega's new baby, Amiga bring you the mother. I think it should be brings, but either way, that's very cool. So you just see an odd ad for the Amiga CD32. Even better, and I'm sorry I didn't catch the gentleman's name. I was told one of the other guests at the convention was basically the Commodore equivalent of Tom Kalinske, and he was basically the guy who was, you know, running the show, and he was, of course, mad at other divisions for doing things poorly and whatever. But in addition to having the magazine, the coolest part of this, to me anyway, is that it comes with an official disc for the system. This is disc number 3. I actually didn't have disc number 3. I had disc number 2 and disc number 1, so now I actually have the magazine of disc number 1, and I have an extra copy of disc number 2. But that was the real prize, was disc number 3. So huge shout out to Tom at Super Tomato for doing that for me. You didn't have to, but I appreciate it. Now, back onto the convention stuff. So a few random things that we got here. All this stuff was just donations. So one guy reached out to me on Facebook Messenger, which, by the way, that's a terrible way to get a hold of me because I almost never look at it. So I think he just got a little, quote unquote, lucky in the sense that I happened to look at it that day. But yeah, he basically said his name was Lee, and he had a whole bunch of just stuff he was trying to get rid of, and he was happy to donate it to me. So here's what it ended up being. First was this plastic thing, and I had no idea what this is. It turns out what this is a grip for the Game Boy Advance SP, and you just put it in there, and it makes it a little bit easier to hold and to play and stuff like that. So very cool. I have not tried it yet or anything, but he threw that in. A keychain for Streets of Rage 4 from the Limited Run Games bundle. Another Game Boy Advance SP accessory. This plugs into the one of the ports on the system, and it creates a headphone jack, so you can use headphones on the system, which is cool. I never really attempted to do that, but I guess now I could if I really wanted to. He also included some other Limited Run stuff. He gave me cards for Scott Pilgrim versus the Universe, as well as Streets of Rage 4, a poster for Streets of Rage 4, the official music CD for Streets of Rage 4, a couple of metal Switch cases. This one is for Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD, Super Mario 3D World. These are not actually the games, they're just the metal tins, and then Super Smash Brothers, which was cool. But actual games, this may not shock you, he gave me Streets of Rage 4 for the Nintendo Switch. This is sealed, as is this Scott Pilgrim versus the World, the game, complete edition. Both sealed, both Limited Run Games versions, and he just gave them to me for free. So, Lee, thank you very much for that. You did not have to, but I appreciate the gesture all the same. I apologize if you guys hear sirens outside. They don't like me getting free stuff, apparently. So, sorry about that. But, we'll move on. I also, there was a guy who reached out whose name is George, and he was cool. He came to the show. He's like, here's a whole bunch of stuff I have if you want any of it. And I was like, oh, you don't have to do that. And he's like, no, come on, man, I want to give you something. So I picked out something amongst his options, and what I took was this. This is F-Zero Maximum Velocity for the Game Boy Advance. And just this one little game, but that's very cool. I've never had this game before, so I appreciate that. Also, he asked me to sign a copy of Shenmue 1, and I did. So I felt very bad ruining a copy of Shenmue. Kind of love the game, but, all the same, he wanted it. So thank you very much, George. I really appreciate that. Speaking of Shenmue, a buddy of mine named Darren showed up. I've seen him at a ton of different cons. He runs some various websites, and he's got a lot of Instagram followers. I think it's King Monkey you guys might actually know him. He does a lot of posts on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and so on and so forth under that name. But he showed up, and he actually gave me this. This is a Shenmue pin that was made by Insert Coin, distributed only in the UK. This was actually a relatively recent thing. Insert Coin makes a lot of Shenmue licensed merch, but they often do not ship outside the UK, and if they do, it's usually like horribly punishing. He apparently had ordered a bunch of these, and then he was just like, oh, do you have one? I was like, no. He's like, all right, giving you that. So huge shout out to Darren. Thank you very much for doing that, because, clearly a fan. Moving on. So here we go. I got some other pickups. Now, because I was a guest, I got to walk around the convention floor early, meet people, talk to people, whatever, just kind of scope some stuff out. And that kind of convention, because it was in Wolverhampton, England, which is part of the Midlands, kind of a more rural part of the Midlands. Seeing an American is, I guess, apparently a little odd. So anytime I spoke, it was kind of just an eyebrow-raising moment, because you just don't expect to hear that. So it's very easy to communicate with people on that basis, because you're just kind of different. So you're a little bit more, I don't know if I would call that being interesting, but just being odd. Let's put it that way. Regardless, it made it very easy to chat with people. And one guy I started talking to was this guy named Alan. Now, he was a guy selling a bunch of stuff. He had, been a super collector his whole life, but he was just getting out and, getting rid of all of his stuff, pretty much. And I was just kind of thumbing through it, and he was one of those guys who just clearly went to Japan 20 years ago and was just buying a bunch of stuff and then just whatever, didn't do anything with it, and now he's just getting rid of it. So I'm just thumbing through, and stuff was just popping out everywhere, and I was like, wow, look at that, look at that, look at that. And then one of the things that the first thing I saw that popped out was this. This is a game for the Nintendo Famicom Disk System called Transformers Headmasters. Transformers Headmasters, I'm a big Transformers fan, or at least I was, pre-Michael Bay era. Transformers G1, the original cartoon, actually had a successor in Japan only called Transformers Headmasters. And I didn't even know until a year ago that particular series had a game exclusive to the Nintendo Famicom Disk System. And I was like, well, I'm never going to find that, because finding Famicom Disk Systems games, even in Japan, in decent shape is kind of a pain, because the cards are usually rewritten, they're separated from the cases and the manuals. It was just kind of a pain. And this is one of the more interesting titles, because it was completely exclusive to this particular system in that country only. So I was like, I don't know if I'm going to have much of a chance of finding it. And you just flopped it out. I was like, whoa. So I saw that. I'm like, dude, how much for that? And he was like, oh, you want that? And I was like, yeah. He's like, just take it. So Alan just gave me this. He didn't have to do that. I really appreciate it. That was very nice of him. Later, I was wandering around and I went to go chat with him again just to make conversation. And, you know, he had been selling some stuff and whatever. And I was looking through his things. And I just noticed for the first time that he had like an entire section of music CDs. And I like to look through video game music CDs because they intrigue me from time to time. And I found a couple and I asked him, like, how much are they? And he just looked at both of them. He's like, I just take them. So again, he just gave me these for free, which is really cool of him. We have the soundtrack for Donkey Kong Country 2, which is one of my favorite childhood games. And the fact that there's this is an official release from Nintendo. It's got some English going on with it. The cover says original soundtrack, but the disc says original soundtrack. Either way, it's the actual score, and I already listened to it quite a few times. It's very enjoyable. And the other one was Sega Presents Club Saturn. I was just going to kind of put this out with the Pluto as a display piece. I didn't realize, like, this is a music CD. It's actually 2 CDs, and it has a whole bunch of advertisements for Sega merch you could get at the time. I didn't realize these also function as demo discs, as a bonus. So if you put these in an actual Saturn, there's gameplay demos, but if you put it in a music CD player or whatever, then it has a whole bunch of music on it. So that was really cool. So huge shout out to Alan. I was not expecting that. I'm pretty sure this one was distributed, it says Oxford, so I'm assuming this was, yeah, just a British release, which would make a lot of sense. Either way, very cool. Now, later, I'm once again circling around and I come back over to Alan's table. Now there's a guy in my Discord, and here's a huge shout out here. There's a guy in my Discord who we refer to as @Games Adam Koralik. It's just a joke because of the @Games Genesis. So he has this thing where he takes one of those @Games Genesis units and he takes photos of it in front of things, much like I take photos of the Sega Pluto in front of things. Like I took photos of the Sega Pluto in front of like Big Ben in London. He'll take the photo of the @Game Sega Genesis in front of like a McDonald's or something. Just to like, it's a parody of me. He even has a Twitter account called like Parody Adam Koralik or something, and that's what he does.
Hey guys, @Games Adam Koralik here. Suck it, Adam, I'm hijacking your video. And today we're here at McDonald's, one of the best well-known restaurants here in the United States. In fact, I bet you have one right next door. Anyway, follow me on Twitter, link in description below.
But he also, in reality, is a huge collector of these PlayStation Vita. I am not. I don't collect for that particular system. And so he was asking me to look for a couple of European exclusives if I could, because I was, you know, like, all right, sure, I'll take a look. And so naturally, Alan had a whole bunch of them. And I had remembered some of the names off the top of my head. So I looked at those and I took photos and I sent them off in Discord waiting for @GamesMe to respond and see if he was interested. But because of time zones, he wasn't really getting around to it. The convention was over. It was wrapping up. And I went back over just kind of hoping like within the last few minutes that, you know, he would respond, but he didn't. So then Alan was like, why are you so interested in the Vita? Like suddenly, like I explained the story to him. He's like, okay, if he promises to take a photo with the @Games Genesis, I'm just going to donate these games to him. That's how good this dude Alan is, because he donated these to me to donate to fake me for the sole purpose of a parody photo. That's a good guy. So as far as I know, these are all European exclusives. One is Taddeo Jones, which looks kind of like an Indiana Jones game. I think this was Spain only. Vegas Party, which I'm pretty sure was the UK only, and the only reason I think that is because the company Funbox Media, I'm pretty sure, which is the one that made this, is a UK distributor only. Football Manager 2014, which is by Sega. This game is just Football Manager stuff doesn't come here. There's just no reason to. And then the last one I'm pretty sure was exclusive, but I never actually verified this. This is the Muppets Movie Adventure, which to me seems like the most interesting game in here. But I was told this was exclusive, but to be honest, I never verified it. This and Vegas Party are both sealed, actually. So like I said, Alan, super nice guy, obviously a good guy, because he donated these all for the purposes of a single photo joke. And as soon as I give these over to fake me, we can actually have a photo of them and everybody can see it. So very, very cool. So huge shout out to Alan. Now, another pickup I got that was also free, I was just wandering around. It was on day 2 of the convention. In the morning, I was chatting with people, and one of the guys who was selling stuff, we were just chatting for a bit, and he was talking about how, like, you know, he thanked me for coming over there. He'd watched the channel and all that, and I noticed he had like a sea of PlayStation 2. He's like, yeah, I was going for a full PS2 set, and I just kind of gave up on it, so now I'm just getting rid of all of it. And I was like, all right, that's fair enough. And he's like, why, are you looking for anything specific? And I said the one title I am, which is, you guys will know what this is. is. Snow White and the Seven Clever Boys. Yes, that's a real thing. Kind of made famous by JonTron. It's a Phoenix Games piece of junk. I'm never going to get it because it's insanely rare and very expensive, even though there was a time where it was like a very, very, very cheap game. So over that conversation, he just kind of laughed. And then he's like, do you see anything else? And I saw one thing that just kind of caught my eye, and it was this. Max Play for PlayStation 2. If you guys saw last month's episode, this might ring a bell. This disc was released by a company called Daytel. Daytel is basically like Interact. They make like Action Replay and Game Shark, that kind of stuff. Cheap discs, etc. They made basically a disc for the PlayStation 2 and the GameCube that was totally unlicensed by both Sony and Nintendo that could actually run on their hardware without their permission. And what it is it actually is a Game Boy Advance emulator containing 10 piece of junk games that I don't know if they owned the rights to or if they were just public domain or what they were. Jetpack 2, Paddle Panic, Super Power Shot, Invaders, Chopper 2 The Return, Loop the Loop, Pop-'em, Dragon Tiles 3, Bounty Hunter X, and Proxima. Apparently within the code of this game, if you dig deep enough, it also has Metroid Fusion on it, but it's not accessible within game because it's just a stolen Game Boy Advance emulator trying to run on these systems. What's even more bizarre about it is that the disc self-boot without Sony's consent, in this case, or with Nintendo's with the other. And the way they apparently did that is they were taking games that were like surplus copies. In the PlayStation 2's case, a lot of, I think it was copies of Sega Superstars, which was a blue bottom disc that Sega made way too many copies of, so they became very cheap. Apparently, Daytel found a way to basically kind of lift them a bit so you could get just enough data off of them so that the PlayStation would detect it as a legitimate disc, but rather than boot Sega Superstars, it would start booting this garbage. So it's like an official, unofficial release. It's totally worthless. He was only asking like £4 for it, but he just gave it to me for free because he just thought it was hilarious that I would even care about this. They use this exact same, this is a PlayStation 2 case that they designed. They made this exact same version, like they use the exact same case for the GameCube version using a PlayStation 2 case. There was a small update to that one though, because I was always under the impression these were European exclusives. Somebody pointed out to me that there was an American release of at least the GameCube one, but nobody is, like, there's just a disc of it. No, it's just like single art of it. How common? I've never seen it before, never heard of it before. But either way, really weird, odd release. Actual game content, garbage, but the story behind it is fascinating. Okay, now let's move on to stuff I actually bought. Granted, some of this was just kind of thrown in bundles, but yeah, let's get to the good stuff, shall we? So, when I go to parts of Europe and I want to look for new video games, etc., I rarely try to get stuff for either, I'm not going to pick up things that we have here. I'm only going there for exclusive content. Now, between North America and Europe, there's a lot of crossover, so that eliminates a lot of things you would have otherwise had access to. Like, I don't need the European version of Halo on Xbox unless you're just a super fan of Halo. Like Shenmue, yes, I'll get every variant of, but I have no reason to get, like, shall we say, the other normal stuff. You're only looking for the exclusives, right? Now, a lot of those games I've already picked up over the years, so now I'm down to the point where I'm looking for games for systems we didn't get. And two of them that stand out is the Amstrad GX4000, which was a very obscure system made by the British. Alan Sugar specifically created that, or at least was involved with it heavily. The system was a complete failure. It only had like 24 games or something like that. I wanted to amend something I said in the previous video because I basically told that same story before, a previous episode of PlayLoad anyway, and I was under the impression that it had been only released in the UK. It turns out it was released in a few other countries, and the country where it actually did the best, believe it or not, was France. So I might have a better shot of finding games there. We'll see, who knows. But that said, I managed to find 3, and for the GX4000, that is a huge win. The first one up is Switchblade. This recently got a sequel. I actually just got it for the Jaguar like last year. Oddly enough, there's a Jaguar sequel to this made like a year or two ago. Either way, it's very cool. But yeah, Switchblade for the Amstrad GX4000. This one was missing the manual, but it was like the guy cut me an amazing deal on it, so I had to do it. And then the other two were by one seller who gave me a nice deal to put them together. This is No Exit, which I'm pretty sure is just like a fighting game type of deal. And then the other one, which was not a more interesting game, but it's more interesting because of who made it. This is Pro Tennis Tour by Ubisoft, a very early Ubisoft title made specifically for the GX4000. Now, to be fair, this game may exist on other platforms, I don't know. But they made it, and now it makes sense because it was successful in France. So it all kind of fits together. But yeah, 3 games for the Amstrad GX4000. I'm pretty happy with that. Moving on, though. There's another system that we never got that did come out over there. It also came out in Canada, oddly enough. That's the Commodore Amiga CD32, which we had talked about just a moment ago. Now, the CD32 is a fun one to try and collect for because, to me, it's completely exclusive. It was literally never released in the United States of America. Like I said, it did come out in Canada, but only in like the technical sense. Like a pitiful amount of units were released. I've never seen games for it up there. I've seen the console a couple of times, but that's it. The system is region free as well, so there's really not any particular reason to have the Canadian version. But there's a ton of games released for it in parts of Europe, and the UK in particular did very well with it. Even though the system was not a success, because of how successful Amiga stuff was, as you can see, you saw those magazines earlier and the floppy disk, they were basically the same architecture, so bringing games from one over to the other was comically easy. So despite it not being around very long, it had hundreds and hundreds of games, which makes it kind of a fun thing to chase around, because almost every time you find something, it's brand new, or exciting, or different. But that said, I actually got a piece of hardware for it. This is the Competition Pro controller. This is actually a third-party controller for the CD32 by a company called Honeybee, which you guys might have heard of them. They've been around for a while, making a lot of stuff. It's very similar to a Sega Genesis or Mega Drive controller pad. What's funny about this one is that when I was over at Super Tomato, he actually had a spare, like, standard Amiga CD32 controller, and he wasn't trying to sell it because he was trying to piece together a full unit. But I asked him, like, would you be willing to sell it? And he's like, I guess. But he's like, honestly, you know, and then everybody else chimed in. They're like, you should try to find one of these because this third-party controller is way better than the official controller. And having owned both, yeah, I guess I agree with that. This is a far superior controller. So it's very weird that the third-party controller is far and away better by most of the fans of the system than the actual official controller, but that's just how it goes. So the guy who had this, he knew what it was. He had a whole bunch of random stuff. He also threw in a couple of CD32 games. Ultimate Super Skid Marks. This is an example of why the CD32 is kind of a pain to collect for. Just because it doesn't always actually say if it's for the CD32. Nowhere on this thing does it say CD32. It says Amiga CD, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything because the Amiga CD was supposed to be some sort of add-on. There's actually a photo of it right here on the cover. It's half a photo, but like this thing on the cover was supposed to come out for PCs, and I guess this would have been compatible with that. So then the question we all had was, even though that wasn't released, was what does this work on? Because if you guys remember the previous episode, Super Skid Marks was actually one of the games I found for the CD32. So I was like, is this a totally different version? Does this work on that or not? But because we were at this con where there was a CD32 set up, a guy was cool enough, he was like, yeah, let's just try it. So we put it in a CD32 and it totally worked. It's a kind of a confusing system to collect for because you kind of have to already know what it is to know which games work on what, and that gets very confusing. But yes, that works on it. And he also just threw in this. This is the Grolier, the encyclopedia, the electronic encyclopedia. So one guy cut me a deal on all of these things combined, and it was a very, very, very nice deal, so I really appreciated that. Thank you very much. These other ones are just kind of from a hodgepodge of a few different dealers I was walking around talking to, and some people just throwing some stuff in and whatever. So we've got Insight Dinosaurs, which also works on the CD-TV, which is another thing that makes this very complicated, is there was another Commodore system called the CD-TV that was more like a PC, and stuff can be cross-compatible between both of these platforms. Again, it can be very, very confusing. Guardian, this one is for the CD32 as well. This one actually says it, but it doesn't say it with the normal logo. It's just kind of somewhat silently stamped there in the corner. And then you have the more traditional logo, this one up in the top. This is always what I'm looking out for because this is way easier to identify. This is Deep Core. And then we have Super Putty, Seek and Destroy, Castles 2, Siege and Conquest, Heimdall 2. I'm not sure if this is actually a sequel to like that game on Sega CD, Heimdall. It might be, or Heimdall is kind of a public domain thing, so I don't know if it's two completely different Heimdall franchises or whatever. But either way, that's a thing. Alfred Chicken, Gunship 2000 in a long box type of deal. I'd never seen this before. So inside, you have this manual, you have some extra art. I don't really know why they did it this way, but it's cool all the same. And then another one of these long ones called Impossible Mission 2025. So yeah, got a lot of really cool stuff at the con. However, as I said, you can tell there's another pile there. We're not quite done. even though the con was great, and I highly recommend going out there if you ever get a chance to go to Wolverhampton. I'm sure they're doing the con again next year. As I said, I did some game hunting in the Midlands. A couple of dudes drove me around. First is my buddy Martin, who's in my Discord if you ever need someone British to help you with anything. He's very good at that. And another guy named Elliot, also in the Discord. And the two of us, like, we on separate days, we did separate trips. And this is what came of it. I'm going to do these a little out of order just because I want to stick with the Amiga CD32 stuff first. Shout out to my buddy Snowman, who's probably crying because of all the CD32 stuff here. Oh, buddy, it's about to get much, much, much worse. One of the stores that I went to was this game called GameSmart, and it was very good. The guy running it is also named Martin, as if that isn't confusing enough, because there's multiple Martins. But yeah, so he was very cool, chatting with him a while. He got a kick out of the whole Sega Pluto thing. We had it with us. And then he was cool enough to actually let us into the back of his store and just let us explore and like look at all the really cool stuff. And if there was anything back there that we wanted, he was willing to work out a deal, that type of deal. So yeah, but he had a very nice, healthy selection of CD32 stuff. So if you're going over there, he still has some, but I largely wiped him out, to be completely honest. But this is what we got. Trivial Pursuit CD32 edition that has Mikhail Gorbachev on the back. I just noticed. It's interesting. Chuck Rock. I remember this game for the Sega CD. I did not know this game was actually on the CD32, so that's cool. Zool 2, also a cool game, actually, and to find out the CD32 version is neat. Trolls. If anybody remembers this from the 90s, those like weird little troll toys, I had no idea they had a video game. Apparently they did. Bubba and Sticks. This was also a Sega CD title. I think it was actually based on like a bubblegum campaign or something like that. A promo. I don't really remember. Fire and Ice, which kind of looks like a little weird mutant version of Sonic on the cover, and I feel like that's probably intentional. It is a platformer, but beyond that, I don't know much about it. Chuck Rock 2. Again, didn't even know the first one was on there. To find out the second one was definitely a win. Cannon Fodder. This one was actually confusing because I legitimately thought I owned this already, but I didn't. So, because I've seen it multiple times, I passed on it multiple times because I thought I had it, only to find out, no, I did not. So, good to have that. The classic Lotus Trilogy. Everybody said this is one of the better games. It's a good racing game or a series of racing games, so that's nice to have as well. And then a weird combo disc of Alien Breed and Quack. By the way, I rip all these discs so that I can verify the data is all good to go. This one, I was expecting it to be like a decent size. This was like 4 megabytes for this entire disc. Little shocking. But there you go. So that's all the CD32 stuff I picked up. Not the end of stuff at GameSmart, but we went to a couple other stores. We'll get back to GameSmart in a second. Went to a couple other stores. One of them was called Entertainment World. Now, Martin picked up a whole bunch of stuff there. I did not, because that store was more focused on, like, retro PC stuff. But it had, you know, a good amount of, like, Master System and things like that. And I found a Sega Master System game I actually needed. For those who don't know, the Sega Master System was kind of a flop in North America. But in Europe, especially the UK, it did very, very well. So there's a ton of titles out there that we never got. This is one of them. The Terminator. Now, everybody kind of talks about how great the Sega CD version of this is, and it's a good game. I assume this is nowhere near as good as that version, but again, I don't even know if this was released in North America, and if it was, finding it is almost impossible, but they're super cheap. The other thing with a lot of the European imports, particularly like the Sega Master System, is they support the 60 hertz modes and they're region-free. They just require being in a North American console, and it's done. So, yay, there's a win. They also gave me a nice little discount on that. We went over to a store called Vintage Gamer. Now, Vintage Gamer had a great inventory. It was an awesome store to go into. I showed it in the video. However, at the time we were in there, they were kind of, you know, preparing for the con, so the place was a little disorganized, which is fine. But we were just hanging out with them and everything. And the owner of the store was very cool, because I asked him the same question I had mentioned before, like, do you happen to have Snow White and the Seven Clever Boys? He just laughed. He's like, no, but I do have another Phoenix game. Let me go get it. And he comes out with this. This is Kids Sports Basketball. I'm like, because I actually collect these Phoenix things, because you have to understand, Phoenix made hilariously bad garbage for the PlayStation 2. All officially licensed, but mostly licensed through a loophole. I don't know if it was through Spain specifically, but there was basically a lawsuit against Sony at some point in Europe, particularly I think it was in Spain, that Sony lost. The result of that lawsuit was that anyone at all who felt like publishing a PlayStation 2 disc, as long as they paid the basic publication fee to Sony, Sony was forced to press the disc, even though the quality control was just gone. And because I think it was Spain that did that, then it applied to the entirety of the European Union, and the UK was part of that at the time. So as a result, a lot of garbage like this came out. Most of them, if not all of them, are extremely bad, and they're just kind of hilarious. So I was like, how much do you want for it? He's like, oh, just take it. He's like, nobody's ever going to buy it. It's like a 1 pound game. So I was like, okay, cool. So yeah, I got kids sports basketball. And then the last one up, which also came from GameSmart. This one's a big one for me. There's a reason we're saving this for last. I mentioned this in the previous episode of PlayLoad, that with certain systems, you know, like if I'm trying to collect a full set, let's say the original Xbox, you know, I want the entire North American set of it, and then I want to get all the European exclusives, all the stuff they got that we didn't, and then after that you focus on all the Japanese stuff, because I figured the European stuff has better language options, most likely to have English in it, etc. And then you just kind of apply that logic to any system you care about in particular. One of them being the GameCube. Now, I never had a design on a full GameCube set. I basically want every GameCube game ever released that didn't exist on the original Xbox. That was the goal. And then within that criteria, there was only like 10 games that came out in Europe that we never got. There just wasn't that much of an exclusive set in Europe. And a couple of those there's sort of exceptions to, but it doesn't really matter. I was all the way down to the point where there's only one missing. So you can obviously tell where this is going. I found that last one. This is But Ugly Martians Zoom or Doom. GameSmart had this. They didn't have it on display. This was actually in the back room. He said some collector had come in and basically purged his whole collection in there, and it was all like incredibly good condition and everything. I was just so happy to see it because it's like his price on it was super reasonable. I was like, oh, done, I'm totally getting this. And I told him the story, like, this is like the last one. He's like, that's the last one you need. And I was like, yeah, that's the last GameCube game I need. And he's like, all right, I'm not charging you then. So he just gave it to me for free. He just, GameSmart, Martin, very good guy. Just hooked me with this for free just to complete the set. So huge shout out to you, dude. Thank you very much. But yeah, that will do it for these particular pickups. As you can see, it was bonkers, and it was a lot of fun. So huge shout out to Martin from GameSmart, obviously the guys over at Vintage Gamer, Entertainment World, obviously everybody at the convention, which is a lot of people. So we've got Alan, we've got Leigh, we've got, Lee, sorry, we've got George, we've got Steven, we've got Darren, obviously my buddy Tom, we've got Paul, we've got Craig, and of course Daniel over here from GameWave who sent the Dreamcast stuff. So thank you to everybody involved. Obviously, thank you guys very much for watching. If you guys could do me a favor, please like this video, comment down below, subscribe if you've never done that before. Check out all the social media stuff in the description, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Discord, Patreon, Spreadshirt, Travel Channel. Appreciate the support on all that. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all later.